Having car problems? Well, with Rhoda, getting them fixed is as easy as ordering takeout. They'll come pick up your car for free, do any repair or maintenance needed, and return it right to your driveway. They'll even give you a complimentary video inspection of your car so you can see what needs to be done. Perfect for those of us that maybe aren't so car savvy. Book your appointment online at roda.com. And lucky for you, CityCast listeners get a 20% discount on any service for up to $100 off. Just use the code CityCast20.
Today on CityCast DC, we are talking about the newest idea for converting unused downtown office buildings. We're also going to talk about the long legacy of the Comet Ping Pong shooting. And guys, there's something happening this weekend, is there not? We're going to tell you how to navigate it all, or not navigate it all, as the case may be. I'm here with my CityCast colleagues, Julia Karen and Priyanka Tilve. Today is Friday, January 17th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Priyanka.
Hello.
Hey, Julia.
Hey, Mike.
So, Julia, you were obsessed this week about this story. You know, we've talked about this a bunch. Nerds like me love this. I suspect some of you may not. But this idea of like downtown DC has become much more abandoned. Part of it's COVID. Part of it's just that America's changed. People don't go to offices as much. They're desperate to turn these unused or underused office buildings into something. We talked about trying to turn them into condos, apartments. Now there's an incentive to turn them into what now? Anything.
Okay, so this was reported by our boy, Ben Peters from the Washington Business Journal. So there was a program from Mayor Bowser. It's called Office to Anything. This was announced on Monday evening with members of Business Journal's Power 100 list of influential leaders. The goal here is basically the same as converting offices to apartments, but it's aimed at revitalizing the obsolete offices in or near downtown. It offers developers a 15-year property tax freeze to convert their properties largely into non-residential things.
What does that mean?
So this could be anything from like a restaurant to shopping to hotels. A lot of people have applied to turn stuff into hotels. There's one on H Street that's supposed to pop off in the next couple of years. But basically, if this works, it creates up to 2.5 million square feet of repositioned property downtown. So that's a big deal. That's a lot of space that you wouldn't normally get.
That's interesting. And are they looking like mainly just at like what we think of the traditional downtown area, like the middle of the city, or other parts of the city as well?
So there are specific buildings that qualify. There's a couple of parameters that Mayor Bowser laid out for this. First of all, they have to be located within the central Washington planning area or 1,750 feet beyond that boundary. So that's all of downtown, like the Metro Center, Gallery Place area, portions of NOMA, so a small section of that, and a little bit of Southwest DC. Buildings also have to meet size requirements. They have to be at least 50,000 square feet. Mostly they have to be used for offices, and they must be undergoing or planning to undergo conversion basically when the developers want to submit the tax freeze application for this.
So the idea of this is, you know, people don't come to offices as much, and we think in the future they won't come to offices as much. And that makes downtown a pretty scary place sometimes, because if you don't have anybody around in a big city, it can feel pretty dodgy. And it also is bad for other businesses and stuff because they need the foot traffic. So bring in hotel guests, bring in residents. But what are, like, this is what I don't get. Like, what are these uses that fall under anything that have not been identified as, I mean, like we can only have so many museums and stuff.
We agree. Okay. So in addition to that first little area specification that I mentioned, there's some subcategories, and it's got to meet one of the following. So any one of the following, and you can get this tax freeze potentially and convert your office into something new. It has to be located within the downtown comeback plan boundary. This one's a little wonky. It has to be located in a CoStar-defined submarket with an office vacancy rate of 19% or higher.
Folks, I just want to apologize for us using the word subcategory and CoStar defined.
I'm so sorry. I know this is nerdy and wonky, but there have been reports that office vacancies in DC have been up to as high as like 25%. So 19% seems low. Some interesting little caveats here if they're going to do this. If you want to meet at least one of the other following, you can convert it. It must introduce a grocery store on site. It must introduce childcare facilities on site, or it must introduce destination retail on site.
So like one of those. It's not saying you have to have all of these.
One of all of these, yes.
I love the idea of there being more grocery, like this office to anything conversion thing, bringing more grocery stores or childcare into DC.
Wait, so what I don't get is what do you get if you do these things that they want to do?
So your taxes are freezed for 15 years on the building, right? The way that DC makes a lot of its money is through commercial real estate property taxes.
Like, let's just say like a stereotypical downtown office building, it's like 8 stories of like middle-aged people with lanyards who commute home to the exurbs. If you say want to convert 2 of those stories to like an urban concept grocery store, but you still have these 6 stories above that are presumably full of offices, do you still get your tax break?
The short answer is you have to file this with the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, Nina Albert, who we've talked to on the show before.
And then that office decides like, okay, this use qualifies as anything.
Yes.
What would you do?
I don't know, man. I mean, I love the idea of like more grocery stores and more childcare because like if Mayor Bowser's goal of getting more people back downtown to the office becomes a reality, especially during a Trump presidency, you're going to need more childcare closer to your office maybe. And it's possible that your childcare is closer. That would be kind of nice. If we're thinking like large and big and stuff.
Yeah, because the point is that these buildings, in order to be eligible, have to be large. So I love the idea of them having childcare on site, but the majority of the building would have to be something else. I think we're going to see a lot more hotels with restaurants in them.
That is probably the biggest game changer that's going to happen, is you're going to see a lot of hotels pop up. I also imagine that there's going to be a lot of higher end amenities, higher end boutique gyms, higher end boutique shopping, things of that nature, kind of downtown in the core.
It's just tough because you're not going to put your destination store on like the 4th story of a former office building on L Street. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure. But I imagine if you think of it as like a blank slate where you're just like, okay, we have this space. The outside is probably fine. It's just the inside we need to rework a little bit.
Well, the thing I was reading is that like a lot of the office spaces that are being targeted as part of this program are like older buildings. The wonky term is class B or C, but they're basically older buildings. They typically have lower like floor to ceiling heights. And that's why they aren't in high demand for office to apartment conversions.
Yeah, no, it is definitely going to be a challenge to find a way to come up with space for that area. One thing I don't see here is that instead of having like an actual building there, you convert it into like a park or a greenery area. I think that would be really interesting too. Like you have like pockets of dense urban stuff, but also DC does greenery in a really cool and interesting way. And I think adding a little more greenery would be really fascinating, especially for downtown.
We've talked so much about this, but it's a good idea, right? You have like downtown DC, even pre-COVID, God was in the sky and all was well. The western side of downtown, Farragut Square, was always like not fun. Like there was not much going on, after 5 p.m. And so there's this idea like, well, we should get people living down there. Why don't people want to live down there? Well, they don't want to live down there because there's no grocery store. There's nothing to do. There's no gym. There's no childcare, schools. So, okay, let's build some, but why don't people want to build grocery stores or whatever there? Well, because no one lives there. So there's this kind of chicken and egg thing, and they're trying to sort of spur that along by incentivizing people. That seems like the good or the best possible idea. It's just like something's got to give first. You know what I mean?
When it's cold outside, there is nothing better than a warmly lit restaurant and a cozy 3-course meal. And Winter Restaurant Week makes that actually accessible. It's happening this year from Monday, January 27th through Sunday, February 2nd. There are more than 250 participating restaurants this year, spanning over 70 different cuisines. So I love going to Restaurant Week because it's a chance to try out places that otherwise might be a little out of my budget. And there's something both fancy and relaxing about sitting down to a meal where you just pick from a curated menu at the start and then just let the courses come to you. Participating restaurants are offering brunch and lunch for either $25 or $35 per person. Dinners range from $40 to $65. Some spots even have drink pairings, which is very much right up my alley. Visit rwdmv.com to see restaurant menus and make reservations. Metropolitan Washington Restaurant Week is presented by the Restaurant Association, Metropolitan Washington, and Events DC.
I wrote my column in Politico this week about the weird legacy of Pizzagate. And this obviously is on people's minds because last week, Edgar Madison, with two Ds, Welch, the gunman who believed this deranged conspiracy that Comet Ping Pong restaurant was the epicenter of a cannibalistic, democratic child sex Satanism ring, and stormed the place with a gun during the last time we were in a transition to the Trump presidency. He died in a police standoff in North Carolina. So it's kind of on people's minds. One of the things that struck me, because I feel like that incident was actually like a pretty significant like cultural watershed moment in Washington. It was a time when people, particularly up in Chevy Chase where I live, like a neighborhood which is a lot of politics, media people who felt fairly insulated from like the crazy in America and felt like I don't need to pay attention to just crazy internet conspiracy theories and, whatever 4chan is and that sort of thing. When all of a sudden, it got real for them.
Yeah, can you actually talk a little bit more about what that was like for both of you? I wasn't living in DC when this happened, so I read about it obviously from afar, but what did it feel like to be here?
Will Summers, a reporter at the Post, is my friend. He worked at City Paper at the time. Was the first, I think, to write stories about Pizzagate. This was during the 2016 campaign. Everyone thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. There was a sort of a don't take these crazy online righties seriously kind of vibe. And so Trump won. There was a sort of a feeling of like shock in the neighborhood. Like we don't know our own country. In addition to like it not being an outcome many people wanted, there was the sense of surprise by people who thought they knew what was going on. Then all of a sudden, like in, I think, December of that year, this dude, Welch, shows up in the place with a military-style weapon, comes in to try to free the child sex slaves allegedly held in a basement dungeon. There's not even a basement, it turns out. He shoots a lock off a door that he thinks is the door to the basement. It's a little closet with a computer in it. But it was a scary thing that like this like Will's reporting at first. People were like, what are you doing, man? Like, why are you covering these freaks of the week? Like, who cares? But all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is actually a thing that's like physically scary.
And local, like capable of impacting your personal life. You could have been at Comet.
Well, that's the thing. I was like literally like out with my kids a block away, and I suddenly saw, there were suddenly sirens and so on. The conspiracy by that point had like, other stores that just happened to be on that block were being trolled and, people doxxed and so on. And this was the first of a number of things, including there's the death of Seth Rich, who had been a Democratic staffer and was, killed in a street crime. And this became like a right-wing conspiracy. He was killed because he knew too much about some Hillary Clinton scandal, allegedly. Not true. But this, people wound up menacing like his family, et cetera. And, on and on up to January 6th. And I think it left a lot of people here feeling a degree of like specific physical threat that like, there were these incidents where some random, government employee, FBI employee, election worker was suddenly personally and specifically named in conspiracy theories in a way that like endangered their safety. And that was a new and unfamiliar feeling, and I think very jarring to people.
I know for a fact that my family and I actually went to like Comet Ping Pong more after to show support, even after the pandemic, and just go to that block more often in sort of like a way of solidarity of saying like, hey, like, we support your business and we think you're doing a good thing and a great job. But yeah, no, reflecting on it, it's definitely like we thought it was a joke at first and that these people were kind of, what are you talking about? And then when it becomes real, like it really does feel different.
What I think this did, Priyanka, is like, it really sort of set if you think of when it happened during the transition to Trump 1, it really set the vibe of like not just, here's a group whose politics we don't like, but here's a a new normal of like physical risk to people who are just doing their jobs as public servants or restaurateurs or whatever. And, and I think in turn, that probably promoted a lot of the kind of resistance vibe of like, we want, nothing to do with any of these people that characterized the first Trump years. That resistance vibe in turn pushed forward the Trump team's own sense of paranoia and the deep state's out to get us. And so, it created this, it was part of this noxious cycle. The thing that is like I wrote about this week that's really sort of struck me was talking about it. It all feels very retro. That there is, for all that the city is sort of, I think, in a low-level depression about second Trump, it is not, for most people I talk to, accompanied by the same sense of like physical threat that these vigilantes and lunatics, are going to be invading our neighborhoods and hurting us. And I asked around about that. I talked to lawyers who had like tried to, who had successfully done litigation against viral online right-wing lies, and to people who sort of follow online extremism and media. And they said, yeah, that's true, because one of the things that wound up happening, not with Pizzagate, but after Charlottesville, with the Seth Rich story, and obviously after the 2020 election and January 6th, is there was a lot of litigation that was either successful or, inflicted its own pain through the process against people who had promoted online lies. And, you see Giuliani's on the hook for a lot of money. There was, litigation around Seth Rich, against Dinesh D'Souza. And the one sort of underappreciated result is that the far right has become less into the sort of conspiracies that name one specific person. Joe Blow, who lives on Upton Street Northwest, is responsible for blah, 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 because that person actually has, cause of action at that point. There's still, obviously, we're at a huge conspiracy moment where people are saying like vaccines are fake or whatever. But the kind of specific, it's this pizza place or this bar in Columbia Heights where the lizard people hang out, there's less of that. And one sort of side effect of that is that the kind of specified physical threat has abated. There's obviously other and, I think probably much bigger and worse in the grand scheme of things, types of menace that are very much alive. But there's a little bit less of that Comet style stuff going on, at least right now.
Yeah, I feel like the mood of the city has become a little bit, it's less targeted, like you say. I feel like the sense of threat is there. It's just more pervasive. And we can see that especially this week in terms of the way that the security is playing out. There are huge fences all over downtown, far away sometimes from where inauguration specifically is going to happen. Like K Street has all of these massive fences. And it does have this like slightly oppressive feeling of security. But like you're saying, they're not obviously not tied to conspiracy theories, and it's not tied to specific locations. It's like this overall sense of what's going to happen.
I mean, look, if you believe that the deep state centered in Washington, D.C. with all these, and is all powerful, and these public servants and wonks and people who we're all neighbors with are pulling all the strings secretly of society, it's harder to perpetuate that conspiracy if this freaking deep state couldn't even keep Trump from being elected. So, in a perverse way, some of the stuff that became kind of menacing to local Washington recedes as a result of Trump's second victory. Obviously, people feel a great deal of threat against, the things they believe in, their jobs, if they're public servants, their freedom, if they are undocumented people or advocates for them. So I don't mean to say like the city's feels any easier right now, or that the state of truth in America is any better. But this one type of thing that I think Comet and the incident there crystallized, and that was a big part of the reality of living here during the first Trump administration, is at least for now kind of on the downswing. I expect when the new administration inevitably runs into trouble, it'll come right back because they'll want to blame somebody. But for now, I mean, the vibe ahead of Trump 2 is fairly different than it was 8 years ago. Which brings us to this weekend. What are you guys doing?
I'm coaching my girls' hockey team out in Haverhill, Massachusetts for the whole weekend. I leave today. I get to see my uncle and my cousin and hang out with them and some friends, but I'm going to be out of town coaching hockey and freezing to death.
I'm heading out of town as well. I'm going skiing. In fact, most of the people that I know, most of my friends, are either getting out of town, like planned vacations for this weekend, or they're planning to really hunker down. They've already gone grocery shopping and they plan to not leave their apartments from Saturday until Tuesday. And that's because there is a lot happening. Obviously inauguration is on Monday, and we had a whole episode about that earlier this week. If you are going to be in town and trying to figure out where you can or can't go and how you're planning to get there, there's a lot of street closures and metro closures and high security. So we've got all of those details for you in an episode earlier this week. But there's also going to be a People's March on Saturday, and hotels in DC are booked out like 70%. There's going to be a lot of visitors in town. You might just not want to deal with it. So it's going to be pretty crowded. And I think that's why, like I said, most people I know are either fleeing or hiding.
Not me, man. I'm a columnist. I write about politics. I got to go look at the history being made.
You're going to be down there?
Like physically for the inauguration, no, sometimes that's better to watch on TV, but like I'm going to try to be out and see, this is like the capital W part of Washington, not the part we usually talk about here. But, it also feels just a lot, again, less, the kind of more traditional inauguration type things are going to be happening for the first time in years, because last time there was a pandemic and the time before that it was the sort of weird Trump won shock. So there'll be like corporate this and that going on. And obviously corporate America is very eager to show their enthusiasm for this new regime. And, they typically, for all new regimes, they are eager to show their enthusiasm in order to win favor. Yeah,
but they're not necessarily sitting up there on the platform with them. You'll have to let us know if you have any Musk and Bezos sightings.
But, this People's March, they've applied for permits for 50,000 people. There was like 1 million people on the mall by some estimates in 2017, 470,000 officially. And in a weird way, a lot of the normal inauguration stuff is happening. It didn't happen in 2020 and it didn't happen in 2016 because, a lot of institutions felt pressure to sort of shun Trump. But there's a Metro Trump Smart Trip card.
Oh my God, is there really?
Yeah.
And
dang.
It's basically his face. It's something to see.
This is what Metro does. They did one for Obama. And, I don't think it's probably much cost to them. And I expect there's not going to be a lot of purchasers of it. But, when inevitably Metro needs something from the government, has to win favor with Republicans, they won't be able to be accused of discriminating against Trump. There's a lot less. Business Journal had an interesting report about there's a lot fewer restaurants are applying for special dispensation to stay open late during inauguration weekend than is usually the case. So
the Business Journal article did chalk that up mostly to economic factors, said that people were suffering from labor shortages, as in restaurants were suffering from labor shortages, or didn't have the funds to be able to pay for all of the groceries and stuff that they would need to stay open for that additional day. But,
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. That could just be a good excuse.
And I think it also shows who's doing the celebrating. There is a lot. There's glittering corporate underwritten events. There's this crypto ball with Snoop Dogg. There's a sort of quasi-fascist gathering. So there are those things. But when your neighborhood bar applies to stay open later, that's when they expect that young people who actually live here are going to be hanging out late. And clearly there's not a lot of expectation of that.
Yeah, they're mostly targeting all of the parties, and all of the late night stuff is being targeted towards the visitors.
Yeah. So what if you have over this coming weekend, no desire to do any inauguration, anything? Word on the street is it's MLK Day on Monday. I think people forget about that. Also, the Commanders are in the playoffs and they play.
There are some local things, some small W Washington things to pay attention to. Yeah, it is MLK Day. I know that that's been very overshadowed and a lot of people might not be here, but I did pick out 4 events that are happening this weekend that I think might be fun if you are in town and want to honor MLK's legacy. The Anacostia Riverkeeper is partnering with Pope Branch Park Restoration Alliance to do a weekend cleanup. So there's going to be 2 volunteer time slots for that on Saturday mornings. That's January 18th. The other volunteer opportunity that I thought sounded great was in Alexandria, hosted by the Shiloh Baptist Church Historic Sanctuary. People who want to volunteer can help prepare hygiene and household baskets for family shelters or craft prayer blankets for the Northern Virginia Juvenile Detention Center. That is on Monday, and there are various times that you can sign up. There's also 2 really cool music events happening, like jazz events happening tied to MLK Day. One of them is hosted by Taye Diggs. So, I mean, if nothing else, go to see Taye Diggs. That's at the Kennedy Center on Sunday, January 19th. It is a free event. Singers Christopher Jackson and Esperanza Spalding will be headlining a musical tribute to MLK. But again, you're really going for Taye Diggs. And then also on Monday, for $35, Georgetown's Blues Alley is hosting 2 concerts in honor of King. So lots of music and volunteer stuff happening if that is your jam. And then, of course, the Commanders. I'm not even a football fan, but I'm hoping to watch that game on Saturday night at 8 p.m. If you haven't been following along, the Commanders beat Tampa last Sunday in a very exciting game, and they are now in the playoffs. That was a wild card game, and so now they get to play the Detroit Lions, who I have heard are very, very good this year. So that's going to be a tough game on Saturday. Am I right?
That's correct. One of my friends who's in Detroit, we have little side bets going off the record, on the record, whatever, about who is going to do okay. But yeah, I mean, if you go to any sports bar, I'm sure that they're going to have this game. So like Walters and Navy Yard, the game in Admo, like pick a place. They will probably have it. Or you could go full hibernation mode and watch it on your TV at home.
I think if you're trying to avoid the general hubbub around inauguration, going to a sports bar farther away from downtown is probably in your best interest. So like thinking Columbia Heights, Petworth, yeah, just farther away from downtown.
Or just hibernate in your place, watch on TV, make nachos, who knows?
All right, well, you guys have an awesome weekend wherever you wind up going.
Same to you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Priyanka Tilve, Julia Karen, Ash Durbin, Selena Say Reynolds, and Elizabeth Kama. Newsletter editor Kayla Cote-Stemmerman wrote our fabulous newsletter, Hey DC, this week. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, please consider becoming a member. You can sign up at membership.citycast.fm to help support us. We'll be back Tuesday with more news from around the city. Bye.